We begin the day with the first statement from Iran's new supreme leader, or at least that's how it's being presented by the Iranian regime. Mojtaba Khamenei did not appear on camera. Instead, his words were read out by a newsreader. Reports say he was injured in the strikes that killed his father, the former supreme leader Ali Khamenei, on the first day of the war. And now there's speculation whether Mojtaba himself is even alive. Well, regardless who wrote the statement, it shows a regime that wants to project defiance and strength, saying Iran will keep retaliating and use the Strait of Hormuz as leverage. Donald Trump is also trying to project success as Iran keeps launching attacks across the Gulf. He says the U.S. will benefit from higher oil prices, something the U.S. public may disagree with as the economic costs of the war mount. For more on this, we can speak now with Robert Pape. He's professor of political science at the University of Chicago. He also writes on Substack under the escalation trap. In a recent piece for Foreign Affairs magazine, he argues that the U.S. may have bitten off more than it can chew in Iran. Robert, welcome to the day on DW News. I want to begin.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin with something you wrote in your piece there. You say that Iran's strikes cannot be dismissed as acts of scattered retaliation, the flailing lashing out of a dying regime. Rather, they represent a strategy of horizontal escalation, a bid to transform the stakes of a conflict by widening its scope and extending its duration. So, can you explain how Iran has used horizontal escalation, as you call it, to its advantage?
Absolutely. So we are now in the midst of an intense escalation trap where stage one was the precision bombing that was really near 100% tactically successful, killed leaders, hit targets. But as we have seen before with precision air power, it leads to an illusion of control that often underestimates what the enemy can do. And in this case, it often leads to lashing back. Well, in this case, the lashing back that's occurring is a coherent horizontal escalation strategy with precision-guided drones. You are effectively seeing two precision air forces at war here, not just what we're used to, where we, America, our side has all the precision, the other side doesn't. This is now a very different war, not one we've really seen in history to this point. So what is horizontal escalation? It's where the target, the one that has been hit, lashes back and then escalates the war beyond the original battlefield. So the original battlefield was, of course, Iran itself. And what Iran has done is it's taken its many precision-guided drones, and it has coherently targeted nodes in the opposing coalition against it in order to fracture the coalition politically. So it's not just putting bombs on target and doing that in a surgical way. It is doing it in a way that is driving political wedges between the publics, the Arab governments then and the U.S. So basically to fracture the counterbalancing coalition that the Trump administration put together against Iran. This is really, I wouldn't give it an A. I'm not trying to say they're 10 feet tall, but the idea that this is just some, spasms or something, we need to understand we're up against a real foe here.
So this is a strategy, you're saying, that Iran has by attacking so many other Gulf states across the water there. We've seen also missiles or drones landing on some of the other neighboring states there. Did the U.S. fail to anticipate this kind of response from Iran, which, of course, we have to say includes the efforts to shut down the Strait of Hormuz?
We see no sign that the administration anticipated this, none whatsoever. You'll recall that in the hours after the bombing, when Iran started with their initial wave of drone strikes, this was all dismissed as just, oh, these are just the last spasms of the dying body. We will, this will be over, soon in days. President Trump was talking about. Well, that was 12 days ago. So what you are seeing is the opposite of anticipating this backlash and a mad scramble to figure out what to do, you see. And so this has been, by the way, a common pattern in history. It's not the first time. When Ronald Reagan launched decapitation strikes against Libya's regime in 1986, they did hit all the targets. They killed the family of Gaddafi and missed him directly because he stepped out of his tent at that moment. However, Gaddafi then lashed back, downing Pan Am Flight 103, killing all 271 civilians on board, 190 Americans. And there are other examples in history of this as well. And so the problem here with precision bombs and how you get into this situation is it's not just the confidence in the tactical success of the bombs. That confidence leads to an illusion of control.
Right.
The illusion that the attacker controls the escalation, and that illusion is disappearing fast in this situation.
So, what options do the U.S. and Israel have now to effectively respond to Iran's war strategy?
They have no good options here. And what you're seeing is they're doubling down. So this is, again, the natural stage of the escalation trap. So faced with the surprise of the lashing back, you are now getting a doubling down. We saw this, by the way, in Vietnam, as Lyndon Johnson kept escalating, trying to find the point that would break the enemy's will. Sounds very much like the rhetoric of President Trump. He's looking for that breaking point, and that's that doubling down. But there's a real problem here, which is Iran is not crumbling as a regime. The air attacks are making the regime actually more resilient. Even as the leaders are being killed, Iran had a plan called Mosaic to decentralize. The very fact of now America bombing is helping to fuse nationalism into the regime, making it more coherent, work better together. And in fact, as leaders have been killed, they're being replaced by more aggressive leaders. It's the harder succession problem, as I've just posted on my Substack. This is really not working in America's favor. This escalation, this doubling down here is actually working in Iran's favor. And this is now going at the soft underbelly of America, turning this into the long war. That's how we lost Vietnam. And this has the echoes of Vietnam all over it.
When you say that Iran is becoming more resilient through this, how do you factor in the fact that it has been targeting countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain and others in the region that are really not happy with that? It's hard to imagine that they are just going to sit idly by and accept this. Isn't this going to make Iran even more of a pariah?
Well, what's happening is there's a gap between the leaders of the Gulf states and their publics. And Iran's horizontal escalation strategy is targeting the political gap, not just putting bomb on a target. So let me explain. The publics there have a disconnect with the leaders. The leaders have been building a counterbalancing coalition against Iran that helps Israel expand. And you see, Israel is actually expanding at the moment. They're expanding into Lebanon at the moment. Well, Iran's PR is also focusing on Israel. And effectively, what they're saying to the publics is, Do you really want to pay the price to help Israel expand? Well, this is a real danger for the elites, the governments in the Gulf states, because we saw this, what happens before when this gap emerges with Sadat, who was the president of Egypt, who signed the Camp David Accords in 1978 with Israel. That was the land for peace that everybody was celebrating. Well, what happened in 1981 is Sadat's own security forces at a military parade he set up as they were marching by Sadat himself, they turned their guns and shot him to death. And that is the risk that these leaders in the Gulf states are taking. It's not just they'll get killed by an Iranian drone. The real risk is a bottom up that they won't see coming. It's not like Sadat, I guarantee you, did not think he was setting up his own assassination that day. So this is really this is what Iran is doing. These are the dangers that Iran is posing to the Gulf states.
Yesterday on this program, we spoke with the former U.S. National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He says anything short of regime change will amount to failure because it will leave the same ideological regime intact, this time wounded and even more desperate to get revenge. What's your take on that?
My take on that is he's talking like it was 20 years ago. He's just out. The real issues here are the dispersal of Iran's enriched uranium. So as this goes forward, you're going to see, I lay out multiple dimensions of risk in the frameworks that I offer on the Smart Bomb Trap, on the Escalation Trap Substack. And what I'm doing is explaining that they're not separate risks. They're going to intersect, and they're becoming overlapping and intersecting risks. And one of the big issues here is we've just seen this with the systemic shock to the global economy that we haven't seen since the 1970s. My goodness. But there's more that's dangerous here with the dispersal of the nuclear material. You see, Trump's bombing in June caused the Iranians to disperse its nuclear enriched material. I have the satellite photographs on the Substack so you can see it. You can see what's happening. And this we have from June. We have it from February. And if we have this in the civilian world, my goodness, what this must look like in the classified world. This risk of nuclear dispersal is probably why those senators are coming out of those classified briefings ashen face. And Bolton's just not talking. I mean, he's not the only one, but he's just not talking about that. And so he's missing that as this goes on, that risk of nuclear dispersal, it can disperse inside of Iran. It can disperse outside of Iran.
How do you think this military excursion, as Donald Trump calls it, will affect America's standing in the rest of the world?
Oh, it's going to persuade the rest of the world that we are reckless and dangerously reckless. So before this, it was already becoming quite clear to the world that we were posing the biggest danger to them, bigger than China. And you saw this with the Greenland incident, for example. You saw this with where Trump is all over the map on Ukraine. And this, of course, is all working to Russia's advantage with Ukraine, which will put great pressure on the Germans. If there is, Russia right now today appears to be making headway in Ukraine. It hadn't before. And this could really weaken the situation for Europe as time goes on. So this will all be blamed put directly on Trump's shoulders, and it will be seen as a through line from the time he took office a year ago, and just as a growing pattern. And you already saw Carney, the Prime Minister Carney, give a big speech about this. This will become the norm of the speech. That will seem like Carney's position will be the moderate position over time, because Trump triggered all this. He's actually triggering the dispersal of the nuclear material and the global economic shock at the same time. This will be lost on none of the leaders.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that enriched uranium. Robert Pape, professor of political science from the University of Chicago. You'll find him on Substack at the Escalation Trap. Thanks for speaking with us today on The Day.
Yeah, thank you for having me.